Hello, guys. David Vose here, and it is another beautiful day in paradise. No rain, probably because of that hurricane coming up over there in Texas. But I imagine after a few more days, we might get a little rain. But I hope you're having a wonderful day where you are. Friends, this is going to be an eye-opening video. And for those of you who know prophecy a little bit, you've done a little bit of studying in Daniel and Revelation, you'll be very familiar with everything I'm going to tell you today. But what you didn't know, and what I didn't know until today, we're doing this on the fly. I just found this out. And it's odd to me that I didn't know, that I never cared to look, right? I never even thought about looking this particular date up when this particular thing happened, which will indicate to us when in the reality it would happen, because this is the type. And what a type is, or a shadow, is something that happens literally in the past that foreshadows something that's going to happen in the future. And it's all talked about in Daniel and Revelation and Hosea and different books. Jeremiah, Ezekiel. We're going to talk about things that relate to all those books. And you're familiar with a lot of this. We all know the Great Tribulation is coming, and we all get what Jesus was saying in Matthew 24. When you catch sight of the abomination spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Now that's what we need to know. But we ain't caught sight of it yet, right? But when we do catch sight of it, oh buddy, that's when the Great Tribulation begins. And that's good news, because that means it ain't much longer after that and Jesus returns, friends. Oh, Betty, we're there. I guarantee it. And now, some of you may not have been watching all the videos that we've done, but we've talked about the 1948 thing. Now, I've heard people say, oh yeah, Jesus said when you see the fig tree blossom, and that means Israel. And I didn't know where they got that exactly, but I just kind of went along with it. You know, we just accept if everybody's saying it must be true. But I never actually looked it up as to what the fig tree meant. Well, the fig tree, as I've determined, is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it rarely represents, it's kind of like, people always say, oh, well, beasts represent governments, right? Trees represent governments, and horns represent governments. And, it's like, what? Everything's government. Mountains, right? Well, it's true because they all have something to do with something. A horn really represents the power of a beast. Sometimes it's just the man or the king on the government. Sometimes a beast is, usually it's the government of some kind. We had a goat that was, Greece, and we had a leopard. We had a bear, which was Medo-Persia and stuff like this in the Bible. Well, it's much deeper, of course, as we've seen since that in the last few months. We've been talking about how these beasts and stuff represents the astrological signs, but these governments came up at particular appointed times, and it was being mirrored from the astrological signs. But we're not going to get into all of that. But why is Jesus talking about the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Well, knowledge of good and evil is the base of the law. And the law is the base of this government, which is Yahweh's government. And the mark of the hand and the forehead is the law of Moses. And this beast, the leopard, bear, lion, is talked about in Hosea 13. And Yahweh says, I am this beast that is a leopard, a bear, and a lion. And I'm going to rip Israel and destroy it. So Hosea 13 is saying that Yahweh is coming in his vengeance to destroy Israel and demand that all the world worship him. That is the Antichrist, is the man who says, because Yahweh says, I am the only Savior. I recognize no other. Yahweh's coming in his own name. And this is why Jesus said, I've come in my Father's name, but you've rejected me. But when he comes in his own name, Yahweh, you will receive him. That is the Antichrist. Now, The law then has to have teeth. We've been under the law in a sense, but we've also been under Christ and love, and we don't have kings anymore, right? But we're kind of in an apostasy anyway, because we're demanding that everybody keep the law, and it's based on the Ten Commandments. Everybody knows civil law and so forth. But you see Trump talking about the Noahide laws and all this talk about restoring Jerusalem and stuff. They are definitively planning on the New World Order being the rise of this kingdom of the Antichrist, the beast, which is the law of Moses, which is what these Bavarians have been trying to get us to for a long time. They've made all this Satanism and transgenderism and chaos just to get the people to wear them out, right? So we'll finally say, okay, fine, bring back the law. We're tired of chaos and insanity, right? Well, you're going to wish you didn't have the law, because they'll behead you for believing in Jesus, because you'll only be allowed to worship Jehovah. And that's what it means. That's what the law on your hand, your forehead is. It's the first 3 commandments: get down and worship Jehovah or he'll kill you. And the second commandment, you better worship me and no idols or I'll kill you. And the third one is keep my name sacred and I'm the Lord and you worship me or I'll kill you. This is the law. This is the law of vengeance that's about to do away or try to do away with the Constitution of the United States. So, the establishing then of this tree, when we saw the tree begin to put forth leaves, it wasn't established yet, but it was beginning to put forth leaves. You know that summer is nigh. I really do think it means the birth of Israel as a nation in 1948. And it could have even been in December of 1947. Trump went over there in 2017 and reestablished Jerusalem as the capital to fulfill Jeremiah's 70 years. And this was what Cyrus the Great did when he gave the call to rebuild Jerusalem. This fulfills biblical prophecy. I believe Trump has been declared the Cyrus Messiah for them, which would be our Antichrist. And I do think he'll probably die. The Bible says that he receives a wound in the head and dies. I don't know when Trump will pass away, but the Simpsons have said that he's going to be in a casket. So this is just what I'm assuming, is that Trump will then die, and then when he's raised up, it probably will be inside of the computer, AI. And they'll tell us it's Trump, but it's probably just Satan. It will be, Satan will enter into him just before he dies or something. And somehow he gets into the computer and the whole world's being run by Satan now. And it's Yahweh. And you have to keep the law. And so I don't know exactly when they would try to assassinate him, but it may have something to do with, Biden and they think Trump's going to win, so they assassinate him or whatever. But there are other ideas that, things that could happen. We don't know exactly. But we know that something is about to happen in the month of July. And I'm going to go through some things with you that you probably never heard before. We always talk about 1,260 days, but nobody ever stops to think. It tells us exactly when they will begin, when those days will begin. It says, when you catch sight of the abomination and sacrifices and gift offerings cease. Well, when did that happen? Well, friends, it happened in July of 70 AD. And the tribulation began then, and the Gentiles trampled the holy city, and what was desolate shall lie desolate until the consummation. And that was the tribulation, or the times of the Gentiles, from 70 on. And we know the exact date. It was 3 weeks before the 9th of Av, which is the 17th of Tammuz, which would be our July 23rd. So, I don't think people have a grasp on a lot of this, because there really is a lot of stuff that you got to keep in mind, and we don't live back in those days, and we're not Jewish worshipers. We don't know the dates and all the things and all their holidays. And there's, we don't do bar mitzvahs and all this. And so there's a lot that's going on in the Bible that if you knew all of this stuff, you'd know a lot more about what's about to happen. One thing I had always noticed is that there was this thing where people talked about 66 AD to 70 was the tribulation. People were eating their babies. Had to be, right? That was the tribulation. But I didn't know the history well enough in the detail to know what exactly was the right date to start the 1,260 days, if we're going to do it in this typical fulfillment. I mean, there were several typical types. 167 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes does the same thing, and there's a lot of the same things, and sacrifices ceased. Well, the Bible tells you that the 1,260 days begins at a specific date when you catch sight of the daily sacrifices being stopped, ceasing. Well, I don't know why. I probably think it's the Holy Spirit that just doesn't open these things up to your mind. You just don't think about them. But it was always a general thing. Well, Jerusalem was destroyed. Okay, but did the tribulation happen before that in 66? And then it was completely destroyed in 70? Or did it, when it was destroyed in 70, did the 3.5 years begin then and they had a tribulation to 73? Because I knew something about Masada. There were still wars going on. It was still tribulation going on for 3 years after 70. So I was like, what's the right date? Well, I never thought to even look to see when exactly, what was the date that the temple sacrifices ceased. They were still having temple sacrifices in Jerusalem, right? All the way up to when? Well, look at this. 2 fulfillments. 167 BC, the abomination was pagans entering in the temple, and sacrifices stopped at the same time on the 6th of December, 167 BC, and resumed 1,150 days later. Is that the fulfillment of Daniel chapter 8, the 2,300 evenings and mornings, which is 1,150 days? Never knew that before. So that was one fulfillment, but it's in Daniel 8. There's another one in Daniel 9. What is that one? Well, they were resumed again on December the 14th, 164 BC, and temple worship was restored. Well, in AD 70, the abomination was Jewish armies surrounding Jerusalem in the 28th of August, AD 66. But temple sacrifices stopped 4 years later on the 14th of July, AD 70. So the tribulation did not begin in 66 AD, but in 70 when the city of Jerusalem was completely destroyed. And then exactly 3 weeks later on August 6th, AD 70, the temple was destroyed forever. Friends, it had come to my attention that the 1,260 days did not, in fact, start on April the 8th or March the 30th. Those were great tries, but we see here there is a specific date that I did not even think to look for, because the Bible tells us specifically that the 1,260 days of the tribulation will begin when the abomination of desolation is set up and the sacrifices, the daily sacrifices, cease. Well, there are no sacrifices over there now, right? But they are seeking to restore them. If the red heifer was sacrificed already or will be by this time, then, or perhaps has already been, for some months, and Jerusalem is destroyed, then it will have happened all over again. Interesting, but I don't know if they did sacrifice the red heifer or not. But we do know that in AD 70 and in 167 BC, the sacrifices ceased on these particular dates. And it was AD 70 that was the fulfillment that Jesus was talking about, that would be in a type. And Jesus tells us that Jerusalem was destroyed completely. See, I had always thought, and I think people taught me, that the Roman armies surrounded Jerusalem in 66. And Jesus said, get out. And there was a little lull, and they retreated, and you had a window, and you could have left. But those who didn't leave went through a great tribulation for 3.5 years until the destruction of Jerusalem in 70. But now I realize that's not correct, because that's 1,260 days, or the 3.5 years of the tribulation, begins from after the destruction of Jerusalem. And so when Jesus says, get out of her, when you see her surrounded by armies, he's not saying that's when the tribulation begins. And in fact, there was mass murder after 70 at Masada, and whole families, and mass murder and suicide, and it was the people eating it. It was very, very, very bad. The tribulation happened after 70. So that is a type of the actual tribulation at the end of the age that we're living in. And remember what starts the whole 1,260 days in the book of Revelation. There it says, and the 10 horns of the beast, they shall hate the harlot, which we have proven from Hosea is Jerusalem, the mother of the harlots. Hosea, I think, chapter 5, at the end of chapter 5 and at the beginning of chapter 6. And so she's the mother of the harlots, and the whole world's being run by her. She's this system that we have, the law system, the governance, everything, that runs this world we've been run by this city, by these laws of Judaism. And so the 10 horns that are on the beast, I believe, are all the powers and kings of the world. Perhaps the UN, perhaps it's just symbolic of all the nations in this conglomerate sort of new world order that we have here, or the powers that be, whatever this is, this Jewish system, right? The present world, it will hate the harlot and burn her with fire. Well, if that's Jerusalem, Revelation chapter 13 and Revelation chapter 11 and 12, all three mark this destruction of the harlot as the beginning of the tribulation. So I'm convinced then that Jerusalem will be utterly and completely destroyed. And then begins the Great Tribulation, where the Judeans were fleeing into the wilderness. They, though, continued. This was called the Gentile times, and this, what is lying desolate, shall remain desolate until the end of the times, when the last half of Daniel's 70th week, or the last 3.5 years, will resume. Because remember, that was only a type. That wasn't the fulfillment of the Great Tribulation. So there is a guy, well, a friend of mine sent me a video, and I rarely even watch any of them, but I just don't have time. But for some reason, I watched this one. And it's about a guy. He's an older guy with gray hair. Dick Algire, who's an interesting guy. And he's talking about this remote viewing. Now, you've probably heard of that Cliff High guy. I've seen him once somewhere. Well, these guys are, I don't know who they are. I didn't really get why they started all this or who they are. He talked about a government program. And what they do is they take these individuals and they have this double-blind, experiment where they go into a room, they show them some letters that are random, and then they just write something down on a piece of paper or whatever comes to mind. And somehow or another, they're able to, in this sort of communication, in this subliminal, when they're asked, sort of suggesting that they see or or hear these thoughts that's going around in their subconscious that will explain kind of in a vision form what is on the horizon for something. And they claim to be very accurate. They predicted many things. And the whole scuttlebutt right now is that July 15th, now that was only, I think the date was only given by one person, so we don't know if it was that date, but all the other ones are saying, yeah, sometime in July, something really big, bigger than 9/11, is going to happen this year. And they talk about maybe it being orchestrated. They talk about it being a big event that people see. Maybe it's some kind of blue beam, or that there will be a lot of discussions about it, that maybe the financial system will fall, maybe EMT, maybe war, maybe missiles, maybe, but something that everybody sees kind of in the sky or something, like a mushroom cloud or a blue beam event. No, this is speculation, but something, they're all saying it. All the psychics, and I do think that there are people that have psychic abilities, even if they don't believe in Jesus or something. I mean, we're psychic individuals, and we sense things. They may be sensing that Jesus is the Lord and not even be responding because they're ignoring that for whatever ulterior motives they may have. So I'm not saying that somebody who doesn't believe in Jesus can't maybe even predict or have some kind of psychic moments. But I'm not into, or do I care what any, psychic down the road believes, especially those who are not true prophets and do not, confess Jesus' name. But it's just an interesting note that all of the psychics, and I think many of them do believe in Jesus. I don't know what Cliff High believes or this other guy was, but they're sincere and decent people. Maybe on the more conservative side, don't like Biden probably, understand and know already and feel in their heart already these are people who don't believe that the world's going to go on much longer. They're predicting a crash in the stock market. Interestingly, they're saying that Bitcoin might go big now, maybe even gold and silver, but they're saying, hey, Bitcoin's going to be the main way to continue to buy and sell is the Bitcoin. See, this is where I disagree. I don't know. That could be that they may use Bitcoin, but it doesn't matter what they use. Could be the bank we got now, could be digital coins of any kind. Whatever it is, we're going to have the mark of the beast, and I ain't participating. So that part I don't agree or understand what they're saying. But the fact that they're sensing, and they have sort of little prophecies and little diagrams and things that they're getting in these remote viewing sessions, that sometime in July, something big is going to happen, like 9/11 or bigger. That may start a great panic and confusion all around the world. And so, this is what got me thinking about, well, wait a minute now. This big event in my own heart either could be the bank collapsing or Jerusalem being destroyed. And I've often thought, well, they could just collapse the bank. They could have an EMT. But a lot of that is like too easy for them, They may, and I sense this myself. This is kind of what they do. They sense it because some people learn how to hear thoughts and know which are light, which are enlightening, which rings like a bell, and what thoughts are really just coming from the lower nature or just, confusion, a stupor. If you have to guess what's going to happen, you don't have any line to the Lord, right? Well, I have these thoughts all the time, little flashes of light, and I follow them, and they're always correct. It's like little images in your mind. It's like dreams, visions, and they're just, bam, they're always there. The Lord's always talking to me telepathically. And that doesn't mean then that I know everything, because there's so much to know. And when the Lord needs you to know something, he'll flash something in your mind, or your subconscious will just be illuminated, and you'll have this information. From that point forward, you have the information. You may not have known it before that. And this is one of those times when I kind of remembered that I'd had this little debate in my mind several times, and I've never really stuck with it in my mind and thought about it and prayed about it to get the answer, and then I forgot about it. Because I really wanted to know for sure whether the tribulation was 66 to 70 or 70 to 73. When I found this date, when the sacrifices stopped in 70, I knew beyond a doubt then that the tribulation had to begin in 70 and lasted to 73. And the reason that's important, as I said, because it means that Jerusalem will be entirely and completely destroyed before the tribulation. And since the Lord has said to me, now he didn't tell me that the tribulation began in April. I was the one saying it might be April, trying to, find out what the date might be. What the Lord has been telling me is to prepare, that it's like probably this year or next, like weeks or months. He didn't give me an actual date. You just have this flash of light, this knowing, and what I knew was the Great Tribulation was beginning sometime this year or something. And I had feelings that it would probably going to begin in the spring or in the early summer or something, that we're about to go into it. But I didn't know about this particular thing. This has convinced me that this event that they may all be sensing in July will be July 23rd. July 23rd is the beginning of a 3-week fast. Well, they begin fasting on July 23rd because in ancient history, Jerusalem has had attacks on this day. And especially in 70, the walls of Jerusalem were breached on this particular holiday that most people don't even know exists. It's just a fast day. And you mourn for 3 weeks because 3 weeks later, on the 9th of Av, which is in the month of August, Jerusalem was completely and absolutely destroyed and the Great Tribulation began. So now we've got a few of our dates more correct, and we understand more correctly that it did not happen in April on Passover. And that was a date that we thought, well, that sounds like a great date. That's exactly halfway, right? In the year, like the times and half a time. It kind of made sense that there was the Passover holidays and then there was the, Feast of Tabernacles at the end of the year, and they were 6 months apart. And that if the tribulation began and was going to last for 3.5, then it has to end in the fall, then it should begin in the spring. And I still think that that's very true. This whole thing is beginning more or less in the spring. But remember, there's 1,260 and there's 1,290 days and then 335 days. And so I'll do more videos on all these dates now from this new understanding. But I cannot, friends, and I feel the Lord speaking. I do. I believe this is real. But I cannot shake the idea that on the 17th of Tammuz, which will be on the 23rd of July, the big event that will happen will be a breach in the city of Jerusalem or an attack or a bomb or something. And that by August the 12th, 3 weeks later, Jerusalem will be utterly and completely and totally flattened, leveled. But remember this, in between all of this, Syria or Damascus will fall, and not one little piece of dirt will be left. It will just be scraped off the face of the earth, the Bible says. And Bozrah and other places that it talks about in that area. It seems to me the entire Middle East is going to be destroyed before our eyes in the coming weeks. Friends, we are only 10 days out from the 23rd of July. And these guys are saying the 15th. And maybe they did see something. Because what I'm saying is going to happen on the 23rd is there's going to be an attack on Jerusalem. And this will be the beginning, absolutely, from the August the 23rd date, from that point forward, the tribulation will have been officially come. And the Jewish people will be going through a tribulation. I think many of them will be destroyed in this bomb that's going to drop. And when the city of Jerusalem is destroyed, many of them will be destroyed instantly. And some of them will die in some kind of pestilence or famine or something afterwards, after the aftermath. And there will be, what the Bible says, is a number of them that will be taken into some kind of captivity. And that might happen literally. What's going to be happening in America? Well, of course, I'm sure Iran or somebody will have been the one to drop the bomb, right? Somebody like Iran or Hezbollah. Could very well be Hezbollah, and that's what happens, how Syria is destroyed, because once they drop a bomb and then Israel drops one back, and then this starts World War III and Russia gets involved. Now remember, Russia is the Gog of Magog who comes down in confederation with Libya and, Turkey and Iran and Syria and these groups. And they're going to then come in and completely destroy Israel. The Gog of Magog. This is what the Bible says, and this is what's literally being geared up. The only thing I didn't know is the exact date. And it's funny that I didn't find this out until 18 days before it's supposed to happen. I believe we'll start seeing this fulfilled. And we will know for sure on the 23rd of July, friends. If there is an attack in Jerusalem, you can better bet your britches Jerusalem will be entirely destroyed and the whore of Babylon will have fallen. Now that's interesting because it happens to be before Trump becomes president. Therefore, there may not be a presidential election, or there may be a group of Americans that decide Trump is their president anyway. Maybe Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, perhaps Idaho, some other states, whatever. Maybe the United States will just say, oh, we're going to have Trump, even if there is no election. And the only ones that will receive or continue to believe that Biden is president, or Kamala or whoever, probably Newsom, if you ask me, will be, I don't think they're going to force Biden out. I think what's going to happen is they're just going to cheat, and they're going to say Biden won, and then they'll say, oh, but we've got to have a mandatory meeting with all of the Democrats at the convention floor as he's being announced to be the winner. And they'll say, but he's incapacitated with some kind of mental problem, so we're going to have to take and have a vote on who we decide is going to take his place. Then they can open the floor up, and I think they'll put Newsom or Whitmer or somebody in there. But if they could put anybody they want, I've heard people say, well, it wouldn't be Newsom because he's too liberal. They don't care. That's what they want. They want a guy who's very slick, good looking, and can persuade people. Remember, he's not the kind of governor or the kind of person that most of us conservatives would like because of the things he's doing. But you have to understand there truly are millions of people that want this agenda of the transgender movement and all of that to continue on. So there will be a lot of people that will praise the fact that somebody that liberal could become president. However, I think it will cause civil war. And even if it's not an all-out war with tanks, there will be some kind of political war or media war at the very least. And I do believe riots. Can you imagine? Do you watch what's going on over there in France right now? They show pictures and they say, oh, it's France is erupted, right? Because some woman conservative got in and this French guy, Macron, is out. And by the way, have you ever seen this guy's wife? Macron's wife, Bridget Macron. Well, she's 25 years older than Macron, there, the president of France. And she actually met him when he was 15, and he was her student in class. Now, they kind of laugh a little bit, like, maybe there was an affair, but nobody ever says anything. I think there was, because he openly fell in love with this woman who was 25 years older than him. He's 15 years old, guys. And so Macron's parents take him out and put him in boarding school, like something had happened. Well, who is this woman that got away with something like that? Oh, I guarantee she's probably one of the most powerful women in the world, like a Hillary Clinton or something. This woman is a powerful woman. I bet she's got all the money in the world and the power and the influence, and I think that's why Macron wanted to marry her. I believe she gets to have her little boy, to be with, and she says she won't let him go anywhere without her, and they have to spend every night together, and she needs to have him by her side. And when Macron took office, he made a new law that says she's got some kind of political power, because in France there was no such thing as a first lady or any kind of assignment or duty of the president's wife. She had no power whatsoever. Well, he changed that, and I believe at her bidding. I think she tried running for offices and stuff. I think she was trying to get some sort of power and gave up on getting it herself. There were a lot of rumors running around that she was born a man. Look, I don't think that's true. And I genuinely believe she was very hurt by that accusation. I don't think she was. And she genuinely looks like a decent person, but I do believe she's one of the very high elite. But that's just another story. I mean, who knows what's going on? But what I'm saying is this is going on everywhere, where these elite individuals are taking power one way or the other over these countries. And I mean, her parents own some chocolate factory or something, like little Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. They're very, very famous in France and powerful people. Like the owners of Coca-Cola or something, they're really big. Remember the Heinz ketchup lady, very powerful millionaire woman that married John Kerry, who was in the Skull and Bones, in the same class with Bush Jr. that became president. And they had this, rivalry there, and the problems with the Florida vote and all of these powerful people. They marry into power, or they are literally, they cheat and they vote them into power, like down here in Mexico, which just happened last couple of weeks ago, where this lady from one of the family I don't even think it's her home country. I don't know how this works, but she ends up becoming the president of Mexico. Well, this is going on all over, and so that's just a side note. Like, well, you see the pictures, and it's just like, whatever. It's the same picture. There's like 40 kids throwing fire bombs on the street and busting windows. We had that times 100 here in America. That was just sort of a practice run. Whenever George Soros says, okay, guys, go out in the streets, it's gonna happen. And they ain't pulled out all the stops yet. So when this happens, whether Trump is elected by the people or there is no election and they're mad and they take sides one way or the other, whenever this actually starts going, I believe that Soros and the Gates Foundation and all the others will bring out their sleeper cells and pay people to riot, in a sense where you won't even call it rioting, you'll call it civil war. And the hillbillies that come out of their caves with their shotguns, and this is going to be one heck of a problem for people living in the city. Remember, there's probably not going to be any stores open, when there's rioting going on like that. People could be starving because war is going on. Then, of course, the stock market will probably crash. Then what'll happen? We don't know. I'm not trying to predict every little thing. But I'm telling you that between the pestilence and the riots and the civil war and the real war and, the pandemics and George Soros's and the blue beam events and the confusion, and yes, a mushroom cloud probably over Jerusalem in August. It could be then at that point that someone will arise. Now, I'm not sure there's only one Antichrist. Just as our Bible in Zechariah says, I saw these two anointed ones. Well, they kind of translate it that way, so you don't realize these are the two Christs. One from Judah and one from the priestly line. So they're both anointed. The king is anointed and the priest is anointed. They're the Christs. So Jerusalem's supposed to have two. And this is why you see in Revelation chapter 11, the two witnesses, which do everything that the two anointed or the two Christs do. And they're Moses and Elijah. Returned. Well, that's also the law and the prophets that are going to be witnessing in sackcloth. The law is going to be gone. The moon will be turned into blood. There will be no law and order. And the prophets, who say the coming of Christ is near and everything, nobody will care. And they'll trample these, and persecute them. But they will show signs and wonders. I think people will be seeing, look, the law and the prophets is coming to pass. What they said, fire's coming down out of the sky and the waters are being turned into blood. And who's doing it? Well, the righteousness of the prophets and their declarations that they made thousands of years ago. And it is now coming back to life, like whispering out of the dust. Are there two individuals? Yes, probably. I don't know. That will be one incarnated. I have to believe if everybody's been brought back to this day of judgment, we're all here. And so probably Moses is here and Elijah is here already. But the Antichrist is also going to have two. And the Bible tells you it's this horn that's on the beast, who is the king, and it's this lamb that speaks like a dragon but looks like a lamb, which is a false prophet. So there's their two, the false prophet and the Antichrist, we call them. And they're going to arise. Now, I would tend to think, it's just my, the Lord didn't tell me this, but, I just am speculating here that the Judean peoples may have a messianic figure that will arise that we don't know about. May not be anybody popular. And that may be their priestly guy, or their sort of their messianic figure in their minds, right? But what they know, and you probably don't know because they haven't told us, that Cyrus is also the real Antichrist or their Messiah. He's the one who did what Trump did to fulfill what he did in 2017 when he made Jerusalem the capital at the end of 70 years, exactly according to the prophecy of Jeremiah. So the Jewish people then have declared Trump to be a Antichrist or their Messiah. But it would be like Cyrus, who wasn't of the Judeans, right? Trump is not a Jew, supposedly. But here's the thing. Cyrus was actually Jewish because earlier the tribes were taken to Nineveh and up to Syria into captivity. And so Cyrus the Great was of this captive Judean group. And this is why he favored Judeans, and the call went forth to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem. So the call is going to go forth to restore and to rebuild Jerusalem after it's destroyed. That they'll do it very quickly. They will think, whoever the Antichrist is to restore Jerusalem. And I think Trump will be that man. That's only a guess. But when you look at what they've told us, you can see how they're gearing it up, because these guys are all on the same page. They're even CNN and all these comedians on late night are saying, oh yeah, we're done with Biden and maybe we'll vote for Trump now. Yeah. They've set it up so everybody hates the left now, and everybody's deciding they want to go back to the law, you're right, and the prophets. They don't know about the real Christ that we talk about, but they think they know that they want to be something to do with Jerusalem, right? You got to love Jerusalem, and it got destroyed. We got to rebuild it and make a temple, and somehow or other, this is what they're going to be worshiping, and they'll get the mark of the beast. The beast in Hosea 13 is Yahweh, and the mark is the law written on your hand or your forehead. And this is the Noahide laws that Trump is talking about. I am not going to go into it any more than that. We've gone through that in other videos. I'm seeing this scenario kind of like a remote viewer here, I guess. And my belief is that something close to what I'm saying is about to happen. And within 18 days, this will happen. Jerusalem's going to be hit, but not destroyed. And then in August, it's going to be destroyed, and that will precipitate the 1,260 days. And if I'm wrong, then one of two things is true. It will probably happen the year following, because we don't know the day and the hour, and maybe they could stab it off for a year or so. Or we're completely wrong, and none of this is going to be literal at all. But if it's not literal, if in other words, if we don't see some kind of an actual 3.5-year tribulation, then these words that Jesus spoke, catch sight of this happening in abomination and in the last days, the Bible's kind of like, well, I guess it wasn't even important, right? It's talking about something that happened. We're preterists. Something that happened in 70 or something. I don't think so. I know that's not true. That's not what the Lord has told me. And I guarantee the Lord is telling me, prepare, and prepare now. And only today, this very day, has it come to my attention that the very date of the beginning of the tribulation, the 17th day of Tammuz, or the 23rd day of July, this year, the tribulation begins. So the desolation of Jerusalem happened on the 9th of Av, which is just 3 weeks later. And that will be on August the 12th of this year. I expect Jerusalem to be completely destroyed. But anyway, I think we'll just cut this a little short today, because that's quite a bit of information to process. But we'll probably be talking about this a little bit more. And so we'll see you guys tomorrow. And I want you to have a great and wonderful evening. And the Lord will bless you. Just cry out to Him if you need Him. And make sure you get your testimony, friends, and seek the Lord. The day is drawing near. And prepare. I'm David Vose, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one.